With the end of summer and the beginning of the parliamentary year in Poland, we're here with CEC's chairman, Marek Matraszek, to recap on the most important events in Polish politics during the summer and provide an overview what to look out for in the autumn. Marek, hello.
Hello.
The most important event perhaps this July was President Duda's vetoes of two very key judiciary reform bills. After 2 months, how do you see the significance of this decision?
Well, the veto itself was a political earthquake because this was the first time that President Duda had so publicly demonstrated an opposition to what ultimately is one of the government's flagship reform policies. And in so doing, he really re-established a new relationship between himself and both the Prime Minister and the Law and Justice Party led by Jarosław Kaczyński. The result of that veto, as you know, was a decision by the President to introduce his own legislative proposals into Parliament on judicial reform. And really the next month or so will be a test to see whether that modus vivendi, that new relationship that Duda wants to have with Kaczyński, is a workable one. As you know, there was a summit meeting about 10 days ago between the President and Mr. Kaczyński, at which apparently the two men decided a way forward on the judicial reform, which would allow the reform to go forward without causing a rupture in the relationship between the President and the governing party. However, it's only when we see the details of that proposal by the President and also hear the reaction of the Law and Justice Party will we know whether or not that plan will actually be able to succeed.
Some commentators have also speculated that if that conflict doesn't end in September and October, that a 2-year governmental review is coming up in November with a chance for a possible government reshuffle. Now, that has been suggested over the past year or so, but what are the chances right now?
Well, I think they're very high. As you say, that was actually the plan of Mr. Kaczyński, to have a mid-term review of the government. And even Mrs. Szydło, the Prime Minister, has said that that's going to come up. The big question is whether Mrs. Szydło herself will be the subject of that review, because another rumour, which is quite strong now, is that at that meeting 10 days ago, it was in fact decided that this reshuffle would take place, that Mr. Kaczyński wants this to happen. It's likely that a number of ministers will find themselves without a job and replaced. The big question, of course, is whether that reshuffle will involve a change of the Prime Minister, which is possible under the Constitution without new elections. And if that were to happen, then it's probable that it would be Mr. Kaczyński himself who would take over from Mrs. Szydło. But that is very speculative, and we'll have to wait another couple of months to see what happens.
So you're saying that a reshuffle is quite possible, but currently the Law and Justice Party has quite high opinion polls. So how would you explain that? Is a government reshuffle the best decision to make in view of such good support?
Well, within Law and Justice, that is actually an element of the debate as to how far that and how deep that reshuffle needs to go, given the very high opinion polls. Mr. Kaczyński is a strategist, and he thinks about not only what the results are today, but what they're going to be in 2 years' time at the time of the election, and that's really what his target is. It is true that Law and Justice is leading very heavily in the opinion polls. It's remarkable, actually, given the attacks on the government, both domestically and internationally. They have a very high lead over the opposition. That's really down to 3 factors, I think, primarily. Number one, things are good from the perspective of the ordinary poll. Inflation is down, unemployment is down, there is economic growth, there is a sense of security, and the government is feeding into some of the more cautious, some of the concerns of the electorate over migration policy, for example. So actually, Law and Justice is genuinely popular. Secondly, the opposition itself is in some disarray. They are divided both internally and in terms of how they want to see what policies they want to be proposing. They really haven't got their act together in terms of how to oppose the government. And thirdly, paradoxically, the fact that Poland is under attack from Brussels and from some European capitals is actually cementing many Poles' loyalty around the government on the basis that it's the patriotic thing to do. So actually, Mr. Kaczynski has managed to read the emotions of the electorate very successfully, and to the surprise of many commentators, especially abroad, he's been very successful in managing the party's popularity with the electorate.
So the big shift that's coming is most likely not going to disturb the monolith of the ruling party.
I think it will be done in a way, if you're referring to the government reshuffle, I think it will be done to strengthen the government. There are 3 or 4 ministers who are a little less successful than others, perhaps, and a little less popular. So it's really about shoring up that government and making sure it's fit to carry Poland into the next 2 years and into the next general election at the end of 2019. And from Mr. Kaczynski's perspective, really assure that victory, which even today is looking quite likely.
Well, thank you very much for that overview. To keep updated on the events in Poland and the region, follow us on Twitter at CECGR and visit our website for the latest briefs. Thank you.
Thank you very much.